Thank you, Paul, and hello, everyone. As Paul was saying, the amount of e-waste that we generate is massive, and it has grown more than 80% since 2010 to 62 million tons produced in 2022, and that's expected to grow to 82 million tons in 2030. So then all of that is according to the UN Institute for Training and Research. A lot of the e-waste is going to West Africa, and in particular, it's going to Ghana. And while many of us are familiar with the images of people sorting through piles of e-waste, burning, sorting, using not gloves, not things that will protect them, so it's to great detriment to their health, as well as to the environment in Ghana. It's actually a far more complicated relationship that the Ghanaian people have with electronic waste and electronic merchandise that comes to its borders. And so I'm really pleased to introduce to you 2 of 3 journalists who've worked the past year and a half to document and tell the stories of the e-waste trade and maybe complicate the narrative a little bit. Benedict Curzon has met and photographed the Ghanaian exporters at Europe's biggest ports and container yards. These are in Hamburg, Rotterdam, and London, sending e-waste and merchandise to Accra, where she also documents the neighborhoods in Accra dedicated to repairing and reselling electronic products as well. Anas Aramiao Anas has worked undercover to both track the path of e-waste to Ghana and from Ghana, and also the conditions of workers in one of Ghana's industrial facilities. His ability to do his work undercover depends on his anonymity, which is why he does not show his face at public events. The third person who was part of this team was Muntaka Chasant, who was unable to be here because he wasn't able to get a visa. But he followed young burners and pickers from their native northern Ghana to the scrapyards in and around Accra, where unrepairable electronics, end-of-life electronics, are pulled from the yards and sent to facilities, and sometimes to return to the countries they came from, Europe or Asia as well. So it's a very complex, complicated path, and these 2 spent a lot of time uncovering it, as well as Muntaka. So Benedict, I'm going to start with you because it's kind of one of the early parts of when there are electronic devices and e-waste in Europe. You are sort of at that starting point at the ports, the container yards. Tell me what is happening there and who you met in those places.
So I would say those container yards are kind of a nevralgic center of the exportation business. I would call them mini Africa, and actually in some places like Rainham, close to London, some of the avenues created by the organization of the container were given the name of some of the African capital cities, like Kinshasa or even Accra in the Dakar. So the exportation of most of those electronic goods, let's also start to nuance a little bit the story behind what's being exported outside of Europe.
Because it's not just e-waste, right?
Yeah, it's what we call second-hand electronic and electrical items. So yeah, for sure. So most of them have been picked up from Facebook offers, on flea markets, on the streets as well, from various sources. And those exporters gather all those goods, fill up their containers, and export them towards Accra. So it's a very specifically diasporic activity. It was not a very easy task to approach them because for the past 10, 11 years, they have been excessively portrayed as like traffickers in a very, let's say, negative light. And my role, and Anas has a different point of view, but my role, I felt, was to really humanize this business and to understand where they were coming from and the social mobility behind these activities. Lots of them started with nothing. They came to Europe with very little, like Sam Osei that we saw a little bit earlier on the slideshow.
His name is what?
Sam Osei. He started his business. He's the owner of the yard in Rainham, and he started with practically nothing. His business out of his boy's bedroom. So some of those stories are huge success and allowed families and people to make a livelihood out of that.
So Sam is one of the people who gathers up some of this electronic merchandise as well as things that may be broken, puts them in the container. Does he go with the goods to Accra?
He's the owner of the yards.
So he's the owner of the
Yeah,
yards.
he
Do some
owns
people-
trucks. He's the one who does all the paperwork for the exports. And of course, you have others like Abu, who is like organizing also containers. So yeah, it's a whole business.
Do some of the exporters follow the goods to Accra like you did? You went to Accra to see.
Yeah, actually, most of those exporters, I met them while in Accra. Because once the containers arrive in Accra, they go to different parts of the city and parts of the country. And then in neighborhood like La Paz, those big containers arrive, they're packed in the street, and people and the merchants and the people who resell those items wait for the container to be offloaded to buy their goods and then dispatch them into different shops and places.
We were seeing some of the images of the neighborhoods that are dedicated to reselling and repairing the merchandise that arrives. So people derive a livelihood from these containers.
Yeah, what was really interesting and a bit unexpected for me was to realize that for me it became a story also on the different relationship that we have with objects, with electronics. So in Europe, you can, let's say, synthesize by saying that we have this, like in the US probably, we have an over-consumerist habit where the manufacturers are heavily involved in the lack of designing repairable items, and we just change phones even though they're functioning. And for instance, in Accra, it's exactly the opposite. You have like entire neighborhood like Zongo Lane, where you have people repairing until there is nothing to repair anymore. So it's two very different attitudes towards the same items. And I just want to mention, like a few days ago, Europe has voted for a set of new rules called the right to repair. So it's going to probably force and demand from the manufacturers and from the consumer to repair their items more. Yeah.
So Anas, you were trying to see sort of the path of some of these goods, right? And also whether it came up against any inspections or any government intervention on its way to Ghana, because the Basel Convention says you cannot export your e-waste. What did you find when you tracked, and you can also talk about how you tracked the electronic waste?
Well, I think it's great to differentiate between what I call functional and non-functional e-waste. There's a whole economy that we have that depends largely on functional e-waste. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with any European country deciding to ship a functional e-waste to Ghana or to Senegal or to Nigeria. That is a livelihood, and it comes at a great help to people. However, in my investigation, what I found was the dumping of non-functional e-waste. As we all know, the Basel Convention would prohibit anybody from dumping such e-waste on Africa. My investigation went to London, and what I did was to put a tracker on non-functional e-waste to see whether the laws that has been put in place to stop such non-functional e-waste into getting into Africa really holds. It was clear that we put it in a container, we shipped it, and it arrived in Ghana. And when I did further checks, I realized that even the scanners, they do random checks. So you can decide that we are bringing 200 containers of non-functional e-waste to Africa, and it will be possible. But that was not the highest point for me in the investigation.
Yeah, tell us about that.
The highest point was when it comes to when such non-functional e-waste gets to Ghana or Nigeria, what happens to them? That's where we found a reverse flow. Companies in Europe and Asia are still interested in certain portions of this non-functional e-waste. So when it gets to these countries, they still get people to remove those portions. And the pictures depict that. They remove those portions and re-export it back to Europe and Asia. The reverse flow is what for me is disturbing. And it's almost like if you want something out of non-functional e-waste, there are recycling companies in Europe. Why don't you just take it there and remove it? Because of cheap labor, when it comes down to Africa, they are able to turn around, pick those items, and ship it back to Europe. And that is what is creating the problem. The dumping and then not touching these things is leading to a lot of problems that we have enumerated, especially my friend Muntaka, the picking, the hazardous materials, the infections that come along with. So that's what I found.
Yes, can you talk about the conditions under which they are getting those valuable parts that these other nations find valuable? What conditions the people are working in?
Well, very bad conditions. We investigated companies where these children inhale poisonous substances. They use their bare hands to take out these parts and they burn them. And the conditions under which these young boys, and they are children of school-going ages, and you realize that these pose hazardous conditions. Indeed, whilst doing this investigation, some died. We even had to attend the funeral of some of them who died, and the effect is really devastating.
Yes, you also have a slide where you talk about how when there are inspections, people will get gloves, and then as soon as the inspection is over, the gloves are taken back.
Yeah, so sometimes you have government officials deciding to get into some of these companies, and it's almost like a dress rehearsal. As soon as they hear that government officials are coming, they put up a nice face and everything is on, and as soon as they go, they pick up. And we managed to film all this undercover, so we are not just talking about what, we are talking about the evidence that we have gathered that is happening. And when you juxtapose this with companies in Europe who are benefiting from these child labor issues, then you know that we are not in good space.
And if people complain, are they at significant risk of losing the work if they complain about the conditions?
Yeah, if something provides your livelihood, and like I said, it's cheap labor, and people take advantage of cheap labor. So people will not want to complain because what's he going to eat tomorrow? The reality is that they've got to survive, and there are no jobs for them, and so they don't mind. Whatever they will do to ensure that they can stay, that's what they do.
Are European nations, Benedict, incentivized to not check for illegal e-waste because they themselves don't have the capacity to deal with properly the incredible amount that we're generating?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that once a container full of electronic functioning or non-functioning waste arrives at the port, I would say it's already too late. Somebody who works in the sector, it's like a bit of a word to say, confessed to me that in the port of Hamburg, you only have like 2 custom officers who are working to process the over 200 containers who are leaving the shores of Germany every month to go to Africa with those kind of goods. So I don't know, it seems that there is a very little will to implement checks and to encourage people to do better. I would say also but the incentive at the moment is expressed in a different place. It's expressed more into the collection of this e-waste that is calculated on the number of electronics that is being put every year on the market. Usually the European countries are very happy when they reach 50% of this collection rate, which means that 50% of the electronic waste, all the things that you are throwing away, disappear in nature, and we don't know where this goes. And it's very likely that it end up in one of those containers. So that's also the issue. And I would like also to underline the fact, sorry, Anas.
Should I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I think when I look at this investigation carefully, I see some level of deliberate dumping of these goods on Africa. Why do I say so? When you look at goods coming into Europe from Asia, you look at the standards that Asia puts in place to ensure that the quality is high. Now, if you can do this to millions of goods that pop into Europe, why can't we do same to ensure that those wrong things don't leave Europe to Africa? It is perfectly within the jurisdiction of European countries to be able to stop this. And the Basel Convention is strict on this. So why? Why can't we do that?
Your work, both of your work, will be exhibited in Paris from mid-May to mid-June, in New York at UN headquarters from late June till August, in Arles from July to September. I'm wondering, I can hear some of the things that you feel like and hope and see that governments could do. What impact are you hoping your work will also have in terms of the individual understanding sort of their role in this? And Anas, go ahead if you'd like to start.
Well, I think that it's about all of us deciding to take one step to ask ourselves, if this product we are dumping is not functioning anymore, are we giving opportunities for people to pack those things and ship to Africa? If not so, what are the institutions mandated in our various countries to ensure that these things don't get out? But it's a clear thing between Europe and Africa. And I think the onus lies on us individuals to ask those questions that where is this PC that I'm not interested in, that is not functioning at all, going to? And probably also to ask questions. Because when you look at the reverse flow, there are companies that are benefiting from those parts that are removed, which means they are fueling the trade. Why is it that those same recycling companies cannot take those goods and recycle them in their plant? Of course, the issue of cheap labor comes. But cheap labor comes at a cost. At the end of the day, Africa has got to deal with the real issues of how these little children suffer.
What impact are you hoping it will have, Benedict, when it's exhibited?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that to bring it to a more personal level, I feel this is a kind of project for many years, working in different parts of Africa. Sometimes you feel that the topic that you are covering is a bit far from the people. And with this project in particular, I feel like even the audience tonight, that we are all very much engaged into this, into what we do and what happens to all the items that we're using on a daily basis, from the vacuum cleaner to the fridge, to the microwave, to the phone, when you actually pile all the items that are electrical or electronic, it's massive. Our life is informed by that. So, this is, I think, a very unique opportunity to, first of all, raise the question, do you know what happened to your things once you don't use them anymore? And by doing that, also, I think, encourage more awareness on, first of all, how to treat those things. But I feel that there is, at the moment, a big push for people to be able to repair. I mean, the role of the manufacturer Anas underlined the governments, but I can add also the role of the manufacturer in making it impossible to repair is also create a lot of problems.
Yeah, and we're in the heart of the place where those devices are being thought of and created, invented, and so on here. In this region as well. This collaboration between the three of you was such a unique thing that Carmignac Foundation funded. And I want to know what you feel like was the added power of it being this three-part collaboration, Anas.
Well, I think it was a great one. I found it very strange. I've done undercover all my life. So when I sat with Benedict and Muntaka to discuss this. So I'm like, what are we really going to do? But then I got to realize the power of photojournalism. I mean, what you can say with one photo, you may have to write a lot to say that. And I felt very proud working with them. And I like the collaboration that we had, the discussions that we had. And sometimes I write something very long and it will take Benedict's one picture and is representative enough.
Can I
It
ask?
was a good one.
Yeah, very good ones, as we can see. Can I ask you, though, what you also find in terms of embedding yourself undercover in the story, in these ports, in these facilities, in these industrial facilities where things are going on, what you feel like it does for the story, that you are willing to do it and have to maintain this anonymity publicly?
Well, I think that one great thing about undercover is that you get to feel it. You get to be in it. You get to understand why people go through that, what they go through. For example, in one of the undercover was where we were given very poor PPEs to wear. You get to understand because you all go through that pain of being hurt and not having money. So one key thing is that you get to live the life. And when you live the life, you're able to tell it as it is. So being undercover afforded me the opportunity to see also the problem crystal clear. Anytime I raise my head, I know what the problem is. I know that we are very interested in functional e-waste, but the non-functional has been. It's also very clear to me that this is clearly Europe dumping its goods on Africa, and Europe is the one creating the problem.
Benedict, how about you? This collaboration, your role in it, what is it about it that, made it so powerful?
Well, I think that in general, collaboration is a process that I've been engaging and trying to include more and more into my own practice. I think photography and photojournalism can be very lonely at times. And after 20 years, it's actually quite interesting and rejuvenating to be able to have discussions, that you're not the only one on board. And I think this is really what's, for me, the most important, is to be able to learn from each other. I mean, Muntaka is not here today, but truly, he's the one who's been working for 10 years in the scrapyards in Accra. He has an expertise that is absolutely mind-blowing. And Anas has this way, so we were extremely complementary. And talking about like a global issue like e-waste, for us it was very interesting to really start the heart of the project with Muntaka in Accra and in Ghana, and to try to understand all the ramifications. So chronologically we start with Europe, but actually the heart of the project is really in Ghana, and the condition of work and extraction of all these parts of electronics are, and we are extremely complementaries, very different and complementaries.
Anas?
We also fought a lot. Yeah.
We also fought a lot.
Yeah. Because I simply didn't understand some of the images, and I thought this didn't make sense. They are like, well, let's put this here, and then Muntaka will chip in this, Benedict will chip in that. I'm a person of evidence. When I say something has happened, I show you the video evidence. So when I see one picture trying to tell every story, I'm like, no, the video is there, and they are like, the picture is there. So the fight was there, but it all worked out to be a very important and unique union. Yeah, sure.
Benedict, talk about, you sort of assembled this team and you presented together to get this grant from Carmignac, the scholarship or the award, to be able to do this work for the last couple of years, but mainly really for the last year and a half, you've really been in it. But talk about how you met Anas to begin with.
I met Anas because I did a project on him. In 2016, we were doing a group project with my agency, Noor, about the people who are changing the political lines in Africa, people who are activating the social conversation and who are effectively creating change. And I think Anas is one of them and keeps being one of them. So, voila.
Yeah, a very powerful.
It was also very interesting to make the portrait of somebody who doesn't show his face.
Well, a very powerful and formidable trio the three of you made, and I so appreciate your willingness to do this work so that we can all recognize our role in it, and really looking forward to that exhibition.
Thank you.
Benedict Berzen, Anas Aramai, Miao, Anas.
Thank you very much.
Was there something you wanted to say that I...
Well, I would just want to add that I mean, it takes all of us to make that change. Let's do our best to ensure that non-functional e-waste is not dumped on Africa. It is killing people, and all of us can have a voice to say, no, we don't need that again. Thank you.